Hello, everybody. This is James Pease with Project Value Engineers. You are in the right place if you've made it today. Okay. Welcome to Project Value Engineers. This is webinar number 3. Today, we're going to be talking about management during construction and through the closeout process. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started. So we'll be talking primarily today about management in the construction process in oil and gas and power and the healthcare infrastructure. We won't be covering the manufacturing as much today. Today, the webinar is primarily brought to you by Lean Integrated Project Delivery and Owner Team Consultation, and we will introduce our panelists. This is our basic agenda today. We'll cover an overview of contracting strategies. Then we'll jump into different ways of cost management and forecasting. Then talk about schedule management and forecasting. Talk about everyone's favorite topic of scope management and change management. And then finish with safety and risk management. As always, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. We've turned off the chat feature. So up in the Zoom panel, which will either be at the top of your screen or the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A box. So in that box, you can input your questions. We will wait to the end to answer questions unless something seems like it fits really well within the flow. So please put questions in throughout the webinar. Excuse me. So my name is James Pease. I'm one of your hosts today. I'm based out of Northern California, and I've spent the last 10 years doing integrated project delivery for healthcare projects.
Right. I'm Freek van Heerden. I work as part of OTC, and I've been involved for a number of years in petrochemical plastics projects. Not just in South Africa, but also in various other parts of the world. And at the moment, we work helping to assist project developers to get projects off the ground as indicated there in the examples. Thank you.
Good day, I'm Koos Taljaard. I'm a consulting partner also at Owners Team Consult. I've worked basically all my life in projects. First phase of my life in a big mining house from South Africa, Anglo American, which is basically working across the world in developing multidisciplinary mining projects, and basically in most of the disciplines of mining, base metals, gold, all of those areas. The later years I've worked in the cement areas and developing business development and implementing cement projects across Africa. Next slide. Okay. Now we're going to start introducing the topics. And the first topic, we're talking about contracting strategies. And basically what we see, there's so many contract strategies in the in the world there, and applied and used by various companies. And the question is, which ones do we need to use? The important aspect of this is you really need to look at the complexity of what you do. You want to keep it as simple as possible relative to the complexity. But the key things you want to look at is this project specific, things like goals and objectives, work environment, your scope of work, your project and your contracting risk, and your levels of complexity and your pros and cons. But you need to really spend rigor and attention on the approach. What is important and very helpful, if you do a project and a contract risk analysis, that will really inform you which direction you to go. And when you've decided, it's important that you really articulate this very well, and that you basically make sure that everybody in the project understands the contract strategy. Contract strategies start very early in the phase, during your pre-feasibility phase, and you have to complete your strategy during your feasibility, basically before you start implementation. Many people really want to, they do the feasibility, get your board approval, your financing in place, but only do the contracting strategy the next phase, and that's very problematic. What's also important, you really have to have alternates when you start looking at your strategy, that you don't jump to the conclusion. Cool. Slide. Why do you really need to look at the contracting strategy? Your Construction Industry International actually have done a benchmark and an audit to check what's the influence of it. And they have found that contracting is your second highest influence on successful projects and influencing your MPV. Only working relationships rank higher. It's important that your strategies align to the owners and the contractor's business and project objectives. And what I'm saying is here, it's not only the owner's objectives, but also the contractor's objectives. Otherwise, he's going to work against you. There needs to be clear project roles and responsibilities and communication channels. And you need to look at the risk between the parties. The common principle is that the risk should be allocated to the party best able to control the risk. So you don't really want to give risk over to a contractor if he can't manage and control that risk. And then your contract must have flexibility in it for scope changes. And we always say we want to have a very tough contract schedule, but doesn't help you because you're not going to achieve it and you're actually going to make things very tough on yourself. So adopting a contract strategy appropriate to the complexity of a project is very, very key to success. Slide. Okay. You have many types of contracts, but to just start putting it into a few boxes and more simplified that your top line there is what many people are doing their projects on, and that's, say, if you want to build your own house or things like that, or people building a small erection works or whatever. So you get a designer in the house example, you get your architect in, he will design the house, and then your owner will go through the procurement, and then your builder will come and build your house. The second level is a little bit more complex, but it's very similar, and that's in your roads, your bridges, those types of things. People use that very often, but you get your designer, in this case your road designer, and then you will go to a procurement and construct of the roads. When it's getting more complex, and specifically mine shaft systems, those types of things, is a good example, is you appoint a managing contractor or an EPCM, engineering, procurement and construction manager, and he design and manage the construction of that facility. And the only handover there is to the subcontractor, but the subcontractor sits most of the time within the EPCM, and they will do the physical work. What is very common across the world in many bigger projects is cement projects. Building a new cement plant is a very good example, is that you go to the EPC concept. So the owner just do a high-level scope, and then the EPC will go through the engineering, procurement and construction. And then lots of people starting using now more of a participating approach. Heathrow airports is a very good example, and their terminals, quite a lot of infrastructure in Australia, where you have alliance between the owner, the contractor, the designer, and they do the full project. Okay, next slide. Risk versus contracting types. What you see there's sort of two pictures, the left hand and the right hand one, but it's basically talking the same thing. So on your left hand side on both of them is where the contractor take the risk or have a higher risk. On the right hand side, your client have a higher risk. So on the left-hand side, the contracts, which for contractor higher risk is where it's fixed price or fixed price plus price adjustment or just the incentive. And where the client takes for higher risk is really cost plus a percentage or reimbursables. And then in your middle is where it's more a balance thing. It's cost plus award fees or cost plus fixed fee, negotiated cost plus and guaranteed. And very often we want to actually have contracts with clients that you place all the risk on the contractor, but then you find in practice it goes sour because they're just taking on too much risk. So the essence is you need to find the balance. Next slide. There's quite a few project execution models, and we have just put a few samples in here, and I'll talk it through. But the more traditional approach is where the owner do the scoping, which you can see at 2, and 3 is the more design and front-end design is been done by another contractor, and then another contractor is doing the actual EPC or the project construction and implementation. You select normally you call it more your design type contractor on a bid or negotiate, but then your EPC is on a bid and that you select from more people. A good examples of this would be a shaft system example where you get a shaft designer to come and do all of that design, but then you do a shaft sinking contractor to do actually your shaft itself. Freek, I think you've got quite a few examples also in this area that you maybe want to contribute to.
Yep, thanks, Koos. So in the Middle East, this was sort of the favored contracting strategy. And at Sasol, we executed a gas to liquids plant in Qatar using this model, where we had the feed contractor was Foster Wheeler out of Reading in the UK, and the EPC contractor was Technique from Rome. And what you can see there is at the bottom there is the cost basis at 100 and the schedule typically say 36 months. If of course depends on the size of the project, what the schedule really is. But the point is you have 2 negotiating cycles here, and the second negotiating cycle before that diamond with a 4 in is normally quite long, because that EPC must now give a fixed price lump sum type contract, as Koos has explained. But it's a model that's been used quite successfully on projects where the feed can be fully specified properly, and then the contractor can bid it competitively.
The next slide is the area that you bring in your contractor very, very early on. And most of the pure EPCs is on this basis where your EPC guy will actually also do your feed. So your owner do a very high level scoping, you hand it over after a bid or negotiate or whatever is appropriate to your feed contractor. And after you have completed basically the feed cycle, you just negotiate the final price and the contractor continue with that. Good examples is where the Chinese cement companies who've done the Chinese EPC, like Sonoma in Africa, have done most of their projects in Africa that way. So the owner don't really have people to come and do the feed, so the EPC is doing the full project through those 2 phases. And what you start seeing here is, because you don't have that interfaces, that you bring the schedule down potentially by 20% or 10% on that. Your problem with it still is you have to negotiate between 0.3 and 4, and if you don't really have enough skills and understanding, your price and your schedule could maybe be higher than you want it to be. Brownfields projects is also, Freek, continue. You've got a very good example of a brownfields project in this.
Okay, yes, thanks, Chris. But I also wanted to say on some projects we actually couldn't negotiate a satisfactory answer at that point before gate 4, and we had to go back to a tendering process just because, we thought the contractor was asking too much for the job. So there is a bit of risk in that. And as Koos mentioned, we have done this often in brownfields things where you're actually revamping a refinery or something like this, where it is quite critical that you have continuity between the design people and the executing people, such that you understand what you need to do in this brownfields basis.
Okay, the next example is where you really during your feed, we want to basically test and see if various players could come up with different options of doing that. So if you maybe have slightly different technologies, or guys have maybe a different ability to manage the specific environment where you're in better, then you will actually bring two contractors in after potentially a bid period, and you could even bring more, but normally two, and they're going to develop the feed for you, and then after that you're only going to decide who will do the implementation. Chevron have done this quite extensively in the LNG projects, and that helps them to really decide the best contractor for B. And because you go for that bid selection, your price could be much more firm and in the next phase. Okay.
I think for this to work, you also would need the feed contractor must know the technology. So either the EPC must partner with a licensor for that, or the EPC contractor is also the licensor of technologies, to get it to work.
Yeah. Quite a lot of people starting to use more of the integrated approach, and I think the Heathrow terminals projects over the last few years after the problematic start of Terminal 5 is a very good example of this. But what you really do is you select very early on in the project during stage 2 in your scoping phase, your contractor after bid and alliance. But you really bring in all your players, your owner, your contractor, even your subcontractors, your engineers together, and they go through the whole phase. So from where they'll go to stage 3 and do the front end, the feed, and start developing the project better, and then go just through negotiation before you go to the final EPC. Final EPC could be your NEC type projects, a way of doing it that works on a target price. But the key of this whole thing is that your whole team work together and find mechanisms to share your pain and gain in this example. Thank you.